Hi, and welcome to the Diablo podcast brought to you by PureDiablo.com, your home for community, an ever expansive wiki, and this podcast. Today, I am joined by Nineball
Oh, hi.
and Jay Wilson.
Hello.
Yay!
He is not as excited to be here as we would have him.
I'm very excited to be here. How dare you?
No, we are more excited that you are here. Um, it is what it is. So, Jay, uh, who are you? What's your background? And history with Diablo. There's a lot, like full life story, please.
Okay. Well, I was born a small. Well, I'm not gonna make that joke. Probably not politically correct anymore. Um, yeah, I am a game developer. I started in the mid '90s in game development. Before that, I was a movie theater manager and a
Ooh.
projector operator.
Uh,
Um,
Not to cut you off immediately, but that's what I do.
oh, really? You
Yeah.
actually you do projection and everything?
Yeah, no, I do. It's now kind of encompassing like the entirety of maintenance within the theater, but I do all the digital projection work. And, obviously I'm not working with film anymore. It's all digital now, but yeah, that's actually my specialty.
Yeah, everything I did back then was film. I actually got to work on 70 millimeter projectors and do reel
Ooh.
to reel and all that old fashioned
Yeah,
crazy stuff.
my old theater still had the old 35s because once they're in the building, you cannot take them out.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're still all up in there, relics of the past. But no, that's interesting. I didn't know that. Sorry, you can continue
Oh, no,
now.
no, that's okay. Yeah, our projectors were World War II projectors
Yeah.
in the 90s. So I was doing that before. I was making levels for Doom as fun. Like I was basically a mod developer. We didn't call it that back then, but and I got offered a job on a game called Blood, which was being produced by 3D Realms, but being made by a studio called Q Studios, which eventually was acquired by Monolith. And we shipped Blood, and it's got a nice little following. And I went on to work on some more FPS stuff. I went to Relic eventually and did some RTS games there, Impossible Creatures, Warhammer 40,000 Dawn of War, and Company of Heroes. And then from there, I moved to Blizzard to take over Diablo 3 as the lead designer. I got moved up to game director, which is it's kind of a co-lead position. We had a game director and a production director. So the production director was kind of the I think he said I was the what, he was the how. And the two of us kind of co-led the team, and then everybody else reported up to us. I was on that project for 8 years, and we shipped Diablo 3, and I worked through about half of Reaper of Souls, and then moved on and did some other things at Blizzard, some R&D projects that no one will ever hear about. Some of which there's little threads of them and other things. I worked on Titan before it became Overwatch, which I don't think anything I did really got into there, but maybe some of the gun work. Then I also worked on World of Warcraft and redid all of their combat presentation systems
Mm.
because combat is a big thing for me. I love good combat in games, and I know a lot about it. And then I took some time off and I wrote a novel, which is you can get on Amazon. It is called Dead Man Detective. It's under the name J.P. Wilson because that way I can have a website that has my name. And then after I wrote the novel, I loved writing it, but I did not like the publishing industry,
Mm.
and I missed games. And so I have a small startup called Gas Giant Games, and we're in the process of bootstrapping a prototype, looking for funding, and I with some other people that I've worked with throughout my career, and that's about all I can say about that. But wish us luck.
Uh, yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot there, right? I have many questions about everything. Uh, First and foremost, I mean, writing a book. Like that's pretty awesome. Um, like, as
Thank
an
you.
English teacher, I have much respect for anybody who can put together a full novel. Um, envy, you can say, as an English teacher, you have to have an unfinished manuscript in your desk at some
Of course.
point. Like it's just a requirement. And then a new project for you with games. Now, if you're not willing to reveal it, that's totally fine. But if you were to describe a style of game that you were hoping to create,
I will just say I really like Diablo, and I really like survival games.
Hmm.
oh, okay, okay, all right. Uh,
There
sounds
you
good.
go.
Yeah, I'm my interest is piqued. You talked about combat, and I feel like that there's a nice little transition there. You said you like designing combat. There's a noticeable difference between Diablo 2 and a Diablo 3 when we talk about combat, and we're seeing it as Diablo 4 is coming out that Diablo 4 is playing a lot on Diablo 3's combat style, which was much more innovative than what we had seen before in the previous iteration. Where did that come from? Like it is a marked departure. This concept of resource generators and spenders, as well as just the general fluidity of combat. Um, how did that come about?
Well, so a lot of the fluidity of combat is just kind of something that um, I enjoy, and I found other people on the team who really enjoyed and believed in kind of that kind of a feel. Like I love fighting games, I love action games, I love good control, I love smooth, and I like things that are kind of over the top and feel powerful and good. I do think one of the things that D3 inherits from Diablo 2 in spirit is I do think Diablo 2 in spirit wants to empower the player. It wants the player to feel like they're powerful. And so I really feel like we were taking that idea and extrapolating and saying, like, well, yes, but it's now, this is the next game. How do we make the player feel more powerful? How do we make them feel better? And part of it is just smoother controls and more visceral feeling, like just more over the top kind of crazy stuff that we could come up with that would feel like the players are gods on the battlefield, which is really kind of what we wanted. From a design standpoint, a lot of that is just Blizzard in general. Like Blizzard can, at the time, especially, there was a lot of push for just very, very good design in whatever you were doing. For some, and I would say in some ways good, and in some ways bad. Um, I think the idea of the generators and spenders kind of a system was trying to get at that. Like, well, we want to put a push and pull. Like, we want the player to make decisions while they're playing the game. Um, and in Diablo 2, we felt like one of the flaws was there actually weren't a lot of decisions to make, and the decisions that you had to make, they were sometimes too they're kind of gangly to make, like the using the F keys to switch between ability builds, like that's clumsier than we wanted. Like I like the idea, they got the right idea, absolutely, but we were like, can we make it simpler? Like so that it's easier to access, so that it feels better, because you can have complicated controls. That doesn't make them good controls. Um, there's nothing wrong with complex controls, but they have to feel natural and good. And so we felt like, well, there's too many presses to do the things that I want to do. And then we also looked at things like the potion belt, and we're like, well, here's 4 buttons. Most of the time, 3 of them are doing the same thing. Like,
Hmm.
why do you have 3 buttons that do the same thing? Like that, you just looked at things like that, just went, this seems inefficient, and that we can keep decision complexity high, but reduce control complexity, because the control complexity wasn't actually creating additional decisions. Or at least that's not true. It was creating additional decisions, but it was not doing it at the scale of the complexity. So it was, if it's, this many buttons with this many button presses, how many actual decisions is the player making? If they're making a decision and then pressing two buttons, well, why do they have to press two buttons to make a decision? Like that doesn't seem necessary. Like,
It's like,
so that was kind of our approach to everything, is how can we get these things down, but then also how can we get Diablo playing like, I want to make some more decisions. I want those buttons I press to be really interesting. So I don't want to press three buttons that make me regain health. I want one button that does that. And then I want another button that's like, oh crap, I'm going to die. And I hit that button and my foot stomp and everybody gets stunned and I get out. Or like, the back and forth between spenders and generators, which is just kind of a nice rhythm game almost, that makes for a little bit more interest. Like every now and then I've got to make a decision about using my spender and what kind of a situation I want to use that in. Just makes the combat a little more interesting. And a lot of that was motivated by just the pursuit of design excellence that was a big push at Blizzard at the time, and I'm sure is still to this day.
Yeah, it's very interesting because that's something that I've looked at a lot, over the development of a lot of the Diablo games, and it's something that you see from other titles that are out there in the RPG market, that there's this kind of like correlation between, oh, well, complexity means being complicated. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be. You can have complex decisions without it being a complicated system of having to have like 5 key buttons in order to get this one desired result.
Yeah, and I mean, some games go for complexity, and that's what they want. I don't think there's anything wrong with that if that's your choice. But I tend to prefer having a simpler system that shoots for depth. Like, and you can get depth through complexity, but I feel like that's kind of the easiest way to get it. I feel like the games that really, really get people like at their core, they capture depth while maintaining approachability. And one way to, I mean, honestly, one of the easiest ways to maintain approachability is just keep your controls simple. It's not a hard, it's funny, it's a simple thing, but it's actually a hard thing to pull off because it goes against the natural instinct of developers to add. Like, we want to add, because that's what you're doing all through development. You're just adding, and adding, and it feels like every time you want something new, it's like, well, do we have a button we can put that on? Like,
just one more button, one more button, one more talent.
Conflict comes up, and it's like, can we make that an option? And some people are like, options are great. I hate options. And I don't begrudge those people who love them. I understand why they do, but I look at it as, if I need a search system to find the thing that I want within your options, because your options are so complicated, you've actually made the choice for me, because I'm probably not going to find your option, and I'm just going to go with whatever your default was. Maybe you should have just chosen that default to begin with. Because the really important options, I'm not going to find, because they're buried in the 800 options you also put in there. But to make that happen, you actually have to, from the very beginning, you have to be incredibly mean about making options and just say, no, we're not making options, because that's what I said throughout Diablo 3, and there's still a ton of options in Diablo 3, like more than I wanted. But that's because I thought that we have that few, that we still have that many, but we have that few because I fought the whole way to try and remove like as many options as I could. But that's my philosophy. It's not everyone's. And I don't claim that it's the best. It's just my philosophy as a designer.
I'm not going to argue with your logic, and I can see a lot of the good points there. You bring this up, and you talk about complexity, and you talk about your philosophy. As a game director, it was you leading these decisions. How hard is that? Like, we were talking pre-show, like right now, I was racking my brain to think of the current game director for Diablo 4. I knew you were the game director of Diablo 3 from day one. So you were front and center as kind of the face of the game. How hard is that? You know,
Um,
like there's a
yeah.
lot. I know that there's a lot to unpack there, so I'll just give you the floor on that one.
Well, first thing I'll say is the current design director of Diablo 4 is Joe Shelley, and he is a fantastic designer. He is. They're lucky to have him. I think he's great. I've always thought he was great. But it's it's very hard, and it's hard in a lot of ways. Like it's hard to even define kind of how it's hard, because on the one hand, like I went from being relatively obscure to what my wife called 2 days famous, which is basically like at BlizzCon, everyone knows who you are. So you get to know what it feels like to be like a movie star for 2 days. But that's still very intoxicating. And you get to be 2 days famous actually more than 2 days out of the year, because you go to Gamescom in Germany, and you go to G-Star in Korea, and like everywhere you go, especially in anywhere in Asia, they just treat game developers like they're gold. And it feels great. Like, but it also, at the same time, all that attention, you have to fight really hard to not let it go to your head, and not let it affect kind of your ego and your decision making ability. Because at the end of the day, like, the Diablo team had 70 to 90 people on it for the majority of its run, and they're smart people. I was just one of those people. And I never viewed my job as I think people look at the game director or the lead designer or whoever's in charge and say, he's the one who makes all the decisions. No, that is if you think that, then you need more experience before you take over a role like that. If you are in that role and you think that, you're doing it wrong. Because your job in that role is to make sure the best decisions make it into the game, not make all the decisions. There's a big difference, because that means that the best decisions are not always going to be yours. Matter of fact, I would say the minority of times they were mine. Most of the time they came from the team. Like, the team had the best ideas, the best decisions. My job was to seek it out and find it and make sure it got into the game, and made sure that all those different disparate decisions felt cohesive once they got there. And that's a really different job. And it's challenging, but I enjoy that job. So because I like working with teams, I like the people that I work with. I think they're brilliant. I feel a lot of the times I feel like the dumbest guy in the room, but that's okay, because it means like well, there's nowhere to go but up, because everybody here is so smart. It's like, and I like watching people succeed. I like people being happy. Like, there's nothing. I've never seen people happier than when they're on a game team that's really soaring, that's really like knocking it out of the park, like that loves what they're making. Like, those people come to work with a smile ear to ear, and to feel like you're responsible for that to some degree, not fully, because it's a team, but to feel like you have some hand in guiding that and making their lives better feels amazing. And that's what I always try to focus on when I'm running a team. Is it's about those things. So those things are hard. Imposter syndrome's huge. I am the only thing that helps me make decisions at times when I feel lack of confidence is I hate indecision. It drives me nuts. Like, because most things fail because people just won't make up their minds. Not because they make the wrong decisions. You can make a wrong decision and adjust. Like, most of the time you will make a wrong decision and then adjust. The bigger mistake is to not make a decision. And so, I a lot of the times I push, not because I'm like, oh, I've got the best idea, but because stagnation is death. We're all sharks. We're all going to drown. I know sharks don't drown if they don't move forward, but that's a myth. that if sharks don't move forward, they drown. Like,
I think certain species actually will drown if they don't move. Yeah.
okay, then those sharks, we are those sharks.
You live in Florida. You should know something about sharks.
just
I assume.
just a few. The hour north of me, or 2 hours north of me in Daytona, is like shark attack capital of the world.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, does that answer your question? Because
Yeah,
there's a lot of ways to answer that question.
I think we were talking pre-show. It just with Joe Shelley, there is that other part of the role that isn't like actually working on the game, but having to be the face of it. Um, is that is that
Mm.
an unfair expectation to put on anybody's shoulders? That's not really the job.
Um, I think some people are really good at it and fall into it naturally, but I think that is the exception. Um, Honestly, if I was not, I do feel like I am good at it, but I actually don't feel that I'm suited for it because I'm too sensitive. Like I get like I get when I get attacked, I take it very personally. And if you are in the public, you are going to get attacked for anything. Like like people don't like the color of my shirt. Like oh, look at what he's wearing. He's a fan of that. I hate that. Like he's got terrible taste. Whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Like they'll pick something and they'll tear you apart for it. I take it really personally, and you
Yeah,
can't really do that if you're a public figure. So I do feel like it's sometimes a bit unfair that there's an expectation that people who are in charge creatively also have to be like their own press person, their own, I do think that we are probably going to reach a point at some point in the future where people who have roles like mine have people like, you know, movie directors have representatives, people who like
Publicists.
publicists and agents and all those things who represent them and protect them and help like prep them. But it's also why like every time you see them speak, they sound canned. They don't sound genuine because they can't. Like because once you're genuine with the public, like unfortunately, there's a lot of people out there who will tear your throat out.
yeah. I mean, you touched on it a lot. I think it's one thing to be criticized for your work, right? Or things that you've put out there that people can, like, hey, I didn't like this. Here's why. Here's constructive criticism, right? But to be critiqued for the things that, like you said, that you wear, or we all communicate, we will all misspeak from time to time. That doesn't seem fair. Like that seems like it would be a hard juggling act of like, hey, I just want to make this game.
Or things
But
that you like, I struggle with my weight. Or like, oh, he likes World of Warcraft. He's going to turn Diablo into World of Warcraft. Just like weird stuff like that. Like, and or so lots of things like that are they're very tough. Like, or just I don't like what you did. You should jump off a building. Like, that's not constructive. If people come to me and say I don't like the itemization when Diablo 3 shipped, yeah, me either. No, I didn't like it either.
Yeah.
It wasn't there. Like, and I recognize that. And like, I have a lot less of a hard time um, with criticism that feels like honest and true. Like, and coming from like a good place of like this could be better. Um, I don't know any really good developer who doesn't agree usually multiple times over with a criticism of their game. They've probably seen whatever problem you have with their game. They probably know it even intimately better and probably hate it way more than anyone else. Like it's, I think good developers, they can't help but critique their own work. I don't have any problem with that. Like I don't have any problem with people critiquing how the things I've worked on could be better. I just think we can have a civil conversation about it.
and in general internet advice, treat people like people. You know, again, I've never had to be under that level of a microscope, um, where yeah, those perks sound nice, but then I wouldn't I wouldn't want half of the criticism levied against you. So, um, yeah, thank you for that. It is super interesting to kind of dig into that. Um, since we're
uh,
gonna talk about Diablo
well,
3, Nine Ball.
I was actually going to ask, kind of like going with that same thing about like kind of like the expectations of the role and such. Diablo wasn't like the first like major huge IP that you had worked on. It was previously at Relic you had worked on, as you had mentioned, Dawn of War for the Warhammer 40,000 series. What was it like being, in that role versus like working on that IP as a third party studio versus at Blizzard where you actually that's their own IP. You're the one that's getting to make all of those decisions instead of having to refer to someone else. Is it okay if we do this? Is it okay if we depict that? Where it's all now you.
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, the two projects are really different in a lot of ways. Diablo 3 was following up one of the most beloved, rightly beloved games of all time. Dawn of War was not. At the time, um, we talked about the Warhammer curse for video games because there had arguably not been. I actually like some of the video games that came out before, so I don't want to speak badly about anybody, but that was what people did. The perception was that Warhammer did not make good games. Like you did not. They were no good Warhammer games. And our actual number one goal, my number one goal for Warhammer 40,000 Dawn of War was to break the curse. Like no matter what happened, we were going to make a good game. Like that's what I wanted more than anything. Now that did mean trying to be true to Warhammer. I'm a huge Warhammer fan. That's my Warhammer table back there. So all those shelves are all Warhammer stuff. That is my painting table. Over here is my terrain table.
I've been
over there for models. I love Warhammer.
I've been waiting for the excuse to go through and show it, but I actually still have your flying hive tyrant that you painted for me. Yeah, no, it's I've actually sold off the rest of my Tyranids, unfortunately, but this one will always stay with me.
Cool.
Yeah, I proudly. Normally, it sits up in the middle of the Diablo collection,
Cool.
So, but yeah, I was just waiting for the excuse to show it on camera.
It's a beautiful transition right there.
So yeah, I mean, but I love. I mean, in both cases, I love the IP. In both cases, keeping being true to the IP was really important. But for Dawn of War, it was really different because nobody had really done the IP justice at that point in a video game. So a lot of the times we were coming up with things, and it was like, well, this is the first time anyone has given this gun a sound. Like, what should it sound like? And I've got along great with Games Workshop. I always have. I still have a lot of friends over there. I think they saw very quickly that I was a kindred spirit. I had an enormous amount of love. And I didn't really have problems with, we sent everything in for approval. I did not have problems with, when they would come back and say, don't do this or don't do that, because I loved their IP and I agreed with them. I remember when we went in and pitched the story for Dawn of War, the original story was linked back to the Horus Heresy, which if you don't know anything about 40K, it doesn't matter. But it's a big event, big historical event in the lore. And we got to can I curse on this show?
Yeah, go nuts.
It's a mature rated game. Yeah.
I'm trying to get rid of the clean tag on iTunes, so.
We got and the head of the, I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want to call anybody out if they don't want to be called out, but he was kind of the head guy, and he was just like, always goes back to the fucking Horus Heresy, doesn't it? And he just laid into us for 15 minutes about the fucking Horus Heresy. And I'm just sitting there writing stuff down and whatever. And we get to the end, and the guy who's my contact who works at Games Workshop is afterwards, he's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, why?" "You just got reamed for 20 minutes in there." I'm like, yeah, but he was right. Like, I don't care if he's right. Like, I get yelled at all the time. Like, I don't, usually people are wrong. Like, somebody yells at me and they're right. Thank God. Like, I didn't want to make that mistake. So he's helping me. But that's just kind of the way my brain works. With Diablo, the big difference was we had a lot more, we had a lot more to live up to. Because again, while the IP of Warhammer is epic and there's a lot of high expectations, the games weren't the video games weren't that great. So like you make a halfway decent video game, and you know, I think we made a little bit better than halfway decent.
Just a little bit. I'll give you that. Just a little bit.
Thank you. I love that. I do love that game very much. I love the whole process of it. And with Diablo, like it's, you know, we did have people who worked on the previous Diablo games on the team, but not a lot of the core people. So we're interpreting. We're also, it's Blizzard HQ, and there's different values there than there were at Blizzard North, and different interpretations of things. And it's a different team at the end of the day. And I think one of the things that's really sometimes hard for people to understand is you can only get out of a team what the team is capable of. Now that makes it sound like, oh, the D3 team wasn't capable. The D3 team could do anything. That team was ridiculous. But there were certain things that, like, you know, for example, the color palette. I know a lot of people find the game too colorful. And that's fine. I'm fine either way. My main response would be, I like it, but my main response would be, I don't think Blizzard at the time could have made a different game. Like, I don't think we could have made a game with less color at the time. Because it was not something like based on where the game industry was, based on where our artists were mentally, based on where our designers were mentally, based on what the company wanted, because we got a lot of pressure from the company about like what the game should play and look like, and that doesn't mean nobody ever told me what I could or couldn't do. Well, one person did sometimes, but not very much, and I could come back at him if I really disagree. For the most part, like we kind of ran our own empire, but you know when people aren't happy. Like we know when we would go to the show and tells, which we did quarterly, and we would show it to the rest of the company, when they weren't impressed and they weren't excited. And ultimately, at the end of the day, if like the company's not excited about the game's never going to ship. It's never going to see the light of day. And so, yeah, we gravitated towards what the company responded towards, and that's why D3 that's why any game is not ever just the creation of a single individual. It's literally the creation of thousands that have varying degrees of influence on what the final product is. And certainly, like, I had a lot of influence because I was at the top of that pyramid. But you know, all the way down, you know, if everybody at this tier of the pyramid agrees, then the pyramid's going to collapse if this tier isn't happy. So, you know, it's really it's complex to kind of describe it. That was the biggest difference, was we had a lot more power, we had a lot higher expectations, and we had a lot of pressure coming from kind of every direction of what Diablo should be. And I would say we had a lot of fights within the team that I like. You know, we had people on the team who were like, well, there's no magic in Diablo. There's no magic in Diablo?
Yeah.
There were people who were like, well, all the enemies are demons. Like, no, there's like insects and people, and now we could say
lightning beetles.
There's no regular humans as enemies. Like that was a thing that we talked about a lot, because in D1 and D2, there's definitely some questionable, like, is that person human? I don't know, but there was no like definite like those are humans, and we kind of went like and said yes, there are, but you know, there were lots of discussions like that. Should there be? Should there not be? You know, when I was like, okay, we're going to do this thing, and they're going to be insectile, and they're like, oh, there's no insect enemies in Diablo, and I'm like, what about the beetles in Act 2? You know, what if those things
everybody's favorite.
I mean, like,
Or
you
maggots in the maggot lair.
Lair, yeah.
but it's like that goes to show like a lot of the times too, like people's view of an IP or a game is their memory, not the reality. And so, and that's with everyone, myself included. Probably the biggest difference is like I almost never spoke without going back and looking. I would go back and look at, and not just at Diablo 2. I played a ton of Diablo 1 too. And like looking at both games, and before I spoke, a lot of the times I would go, no, here's all my examples. When people would say, oh, there's no color in Diablo 2, I'm like, have you looked at Diablo 2? Diablo 2 got a lot of color in it. Now, if you try, you can find a screen that's all gray, but you have to try. Like you're obviously not in in limbo or in some of the more colorful areas. You're not out in the desert. You're not. There's a whole bunch of areas that are bright. You're not looking at the zombies in Act 1 that are almost fluorescent green. Like there's a lot of things that people just don't remember. And there's a lot of things that don't translate from, like, for example, from 2D to 3D, and so many things go into changing. I'm rambling now, so I'm going to
No,
go.
no, and like this is
We,
all like so interesting, and I think one of the bigger things, and we've talked about it before with Diablo 4 now, is Diablo 2 got remastered last year. Um,
Mhm.
and you talked about, you had to follow up Diablo 2. So Diablo 4 now is following up Diablo 3, Diablo 2, but it has that out. It has a Diablo 2 Resurrected where if Diablo 4 is not going to give the output that people want, they still have something newer and shinier to play. Is that an advantage to the Diablo 4 team right now that they don't have that as much to follow up on?
Um, I don't think so. I mean, I think Diablo 2 Resurrected is great, but I mean, it's still like it is a remaster of an older game, so it has a lot of elements of that are not. There's things that you can look back at Diablo 2 and say that is brilliant, but there are things you just look back at Diablo 2 and go, that is a symptom of the time period it was made, and we've progressed. And Diablo 2 Remastered, rightly, because it's a loyal remastering, carries those things forward. And I think it should carry those things forward, because you don't. It's like WoW Classic. Like I love that WoW Classic plays just like WoW when it shipped, because I love WoW when it shipped, and I like WoW later on too. But I loved it when it shipped, and I liked going back to that moment. I don't know that I don't know that it was that different than, for example, like you could still play Diablo 2 when Diablo 3 came out, and it was still great. Like still, I mean, still great now. But yeah, certainly the remastered looks great. It's nice to have it. But I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it makes a huge difference there. But I don't know. Like I'd ask you guys, do you feel that way? Do you feel like, well, if I don't like Diablo 4, at least I have Diablo 2 remastered?
I think from my perspective, like I loved Diablo 2. Um, but it was 10 years in between, Diablo 2 and Diablo 3, so it was much easier to throw on those, rose-tinted glasses in terms of the comparison. Whereas going back to Diablo 2 Resurrected, which has been a blast, I've been far more aware of some of the issues in Diablo 2 that I didn't really feel as Diablo 3 was coming out because it's been a lot easier to jump back in with the remaster and be like, "Oh yeah, that did kind of suck." Um, it's broken some of the nostalgia. So like I feel like my attitudes towards like Diablo 4 and D3 have definitely been altered. Nimble, I don't know if you feel the same.
oh, I mean,
Um,
we talked about this one like when Nerdsword was on the show. That it's like it's like yeah, I absolutely loved D2R like when it went through and it shipped, but yeah, it's the same game that I played back in 2001 2002 after Lord of Destruction came out. I do appreciate some of the new changes that they've been going through and making, and that's kind of breathing more life into it. But at the end of the day, it's like yeah, no, that's a 2 decade old game. That's for certain.
yeah.
Stamina bar. Yeah.
Well, I think it's interesting. Like, I think you can almost make comparisons to this might be a weird comparison, but because it's not a video game comparison, but to Star Wars. I grew up with the original trilogy. That's my Bible. Everything else after that kind of sucks. Like that's just my general. Everything past original trilogy just kind of sucks. But my daughter's, people my daughter's age, not my daughter because she doesn't like Star Wars, but for some, which is, by the way, very upsetting for me. But like people, most of her friends her age, like they like the prequel trilogy, or they like Clone Wars. Like that's what they grew up with.
I
Like
hate
so,
to admit, my son, we watched the original trilogy. He loved it. But then, like I'm like, okay, we're gonna watch it in the order in which they came out, the order in which I experienced them. And out of all of them, he loved the prequels the most because he loved Jar Jar. And
there you
I don't
go.
know if my wife and I are cousins or something like that, like what's happened, but we're doing ancestry.com where we're gonna figure it out.
I just think it comes down to like when I came on Diablo 3, I spent a lot of time looking at the original Diablo because I loved the original Diablo as much as Diablo 2. Like, and they're different. They're real different. And when Diablo 2 came out, there were a bunch of people who really didn't like it because it wasn't like the original Diablo. It's just the internet wasn't as big.
Mhm.
What I think will be interesting is when Diablo 4 comes out, is there going to be, there wasn't really a Diablo 1 community when Diablo 3 came out. But will there be a Diablo 2 community and a Diablo 3 community that looks at Diablo 4 through their own lenses? I don't know. But I mean, that's the way Star Wars works now is that,
Mhm.
we've got the original trilogy people, and we got the prequel people, and we got the Clone Wars people, and we got the Mandalorian people. And they all kind of look at the other stuff and think that their stuff is the best stuff. Like, I'm just like, I'm taking the philosophy of if somebody is happy, don't crap on it. Like, you don't have to
Yeah.
like it. I don't like the Mandalorian. I think it's dumb, but like, I don't think there's anything wrong with liking it. And I'm super, like, I have a good friend of mine who I play D&D with, and he loves it, and I'm very happy for him because he loves Star Wars and he's getting Star Wars that he loves, and I'm happy for him. Like, so
I've said
that's
it.
kind of how I hope we can be.
I say it with my kids, and I've said it on this podcast many a time. You don't
Yeah.
yuck somebody else's yum.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Also, a D&D related question: are you a DM or are you a player character? As like a game director, do you feel the need to be the dungeon master, or are you? Um,
I love being the dungeon master, but I am blessed with so I actually am in three D&D groups.
Oh.
One of which is run by Josh, who ran Reaper of Souls, because he is a longtime dungeon master, and pen and paper. He started in pen and paper industry, and one that I run, and one that my in-person one. And we have two DMs in that group, and they alternate because they can't make up their minds who's going to DM. So we have kind of a wealth of people who want to DM. But
so you
usually I
you
only took over
teleconference or games
DMing
so I could
because,
join in.
I'm sorry,
You teleconference on at least one of those games so I could like join in, is what you're saying?
if we drop a person, I will give you a call.
This guy.
Um, Because yeah, and I like DMing a lot. I will say I only DM with modules because I just don't have the time to hand make stuff. I love hand making stuff, and a lot of the times, like we had a huge encounter we played last night. We're doing Strahd, and it was completely
Oh, nice.
hand made encounter because I will do that. I go like, I don't like this part. I'm going to redo all of it, but for the most part, I have to go out of modules for structure because I just don't have the time to make my own world and my own adventures. But I would if I had more time because I love it. I love being a DM.
And you've got 3 different games going.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I love D&D, and more importantly, my wife loves D&D. So she is not a gamer.
Good combo.
But 5 years ago, she found D&D, and now it's her hobby, and she loves it. And so she's in all those groups as well. So it's something we can do together.
Well, that's pretty cool. And this is a tangent I did not expect to get to. We got to get through more Diablo 3 questions because, that's what we're here for. Well, we have Diablo 3 questions, we got Diablo 4 questions. So many questions. Nimeball, what you got?
One of the other questions, that I was going to ask, he kind of already had answered, but I guess it's like one of those ones that just that you kind of already answered it, talking about like the feedback and such. Was there was you can't go and talk about Diablo 3 without someone going and like criticizing the itemization system as if we're still in 2012 and things haven't improved since then. But where was it, like, as being on the development team, was there a point when you kind of realized that things were skewing away from what your expectations were from the community's interactions, with how like the first implementation of legendaries and such?
So a bunch of people on the internet are going to be mad at me for this answer. But I believe in truthfulness, and I think I've said this before. We knew probably a month or two before the game came out. So we made a couple mistakes. Mistake number one was we were worried about revealing our story. And so we did not do a full beta test. That was a mistake. Screw the story. Like, we should have done a full beta test. Like, I mean, I'm attached to the story and everything, but the truth is that the late game and the itemization and the balance tuning, all those things, like, that is the point of a beta test, and we failed that point. That was, I'm going to put that on me. I'm not the only one who made the decision, but I could have changed that direction, and I was, I bought into this, like, well, we want to keep all our spoilers to ourselves. And I'm like, I think that was a mistake. But the other mistake was there was a specific feature we needed for legendaries that would allow us to basically put abilities on the legendaries, which allowed us to do things like occasionally a treasure golem will spawn. And a lot of the crazy legendaries that we made after shipping, we utilized that feature, but we could not put that feature into the game before we shipped. We just didn't, we should have, honestly, I should have predicted that we needed it like year 1, year 2, and asked for it as part of the itemization, but we missed it. And then when we realized we needed it, it was too late. That train was moving, and there was no, like, once you get, you typically about 18 months out, you make a decision about your ship date at Blizzard, and it, come hell or high water, it's probably not going to move. Like, so you do the best you can, like, in that 18 months. But the thought has always been, well, if the game's not perfect when we release it, the audience will understand, because Blizzard always stands by our games. So we release a game, it's usually great, but it's not perfect, and we keep working on it till it's perfect, and we didn't charge people for it, and we just kind of, I think I maybe over relied on that a little bit, because I just kind of assumed people would be like, they'd be cool, like, we'd be like, yeah, we know, like, the items could be better, we're working on it, they will be very soon. And the truth is, I think that ability patch, which started making the legendaries better and the drop rates better, was within a couple months of release. It's funny, people bring up the Error 37 thing a lot. That was literally 24 hours. And we had more people trying to play Diablo 3 than anyone had ever tried to do anything on the internet simultaneously ever at that point. So it's like, well, I mean, come on, give us a little bit of a break. But that people always remember that. And so I thought maybe we'd get a little bit more leeway because of that, but we didn't get. I didn't feel like we got any leeway. I felt like it was like, well, you didn't get legendaries quite right, so you've destroyed my childhood and you've ruined Diablo. Wow.
I remember like
I thought it'd be okay. That's like we got that like a couple weeks later, and it would be better. Like
I distinctly remember doing a podcast early on after release and talking about itemization. And we brought like one of the big things that people forgot about Diablo 2 was the itemization when it shipped wasn't good either. Like it needed a lot of work. Um, but like we could remember that, you know, because we were on a
Mhm.
podcast talking about it. But the short-term memory was not there for most people at the time. So I do recall being like, yeah, well, you know, it'll get better. Like that's just how it works. Like it
I
will
mean, there's a reason that most people play Lord of Destruction and not Classic D2. Like that was a whole year of no charms, no runes, no rune words or anything like that. It was a very different game.
well, and what's funny is so like, and I tell you, I'm going to say this now, and somebody is going to slip into a DM somewhere and tell me I'm wrong, but um, the drop rate for legendaries in D3 at ship was much higher than D2. And people will say, no, it wasn't. No, you guys never dropped legendaries. D2 was way more generous. I'm like, I have played thousands of hours of D2 with a stopwatch and a notepad, like writing down. I know exactly what the drop rate for legendaries was. Like, so when I say it, I don't say it uneducated. Like, I'm like, no, I know what the drop rate was. I know what ours was relative to it, and it was more generous, and then we doubled it like almost immediately. Like so, but I still have people to this day who would tell me that D3 was like that ship was horrible for dropping legendaries. And the truth was, like people weren't happy with the rate that the legendaries dropped. They're right. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm only disagreeing with their memory of D2. If they want more legendaries to drop, okay, like we can do that. Like we can play around with that. Like and we got that overwhelming feedback, and then we did like I think we did like a double drop rate weekend, and it was like really popular, and so we decided to just like let's just let it ride, and so we put that in, and it didn't seem to hurt the game. We changed a little bit of the design philosophy behind legendaries, just to accommodate for the fact that they were more common. But overall, like, I really felt like the itemization got there fairly quickly. But, not a ship. And the criticism, I would say almost any criticism somebody would have for how it was a ship, I would agree with. It's just and I would say a lot of it we probably knew before we shipped, but they were things that we could not change before we shipped. And then we tried to change as quickly as could after we shipped. Because again, like you get into this window of like your game becomes locked, where there's very little you can change about it, and some high risks changes just don't go in because you just can't.
it's a
Uh,
nice little transition here. And Nineball, I know there's more D3 questions, but like shifting a little bit into Diablo 4, we know there's a closed beta going on. Um, so what realistically do you do with all the information you're collecting from a beta? Like how much can you actually change based around what you end up seeing? Because you had mentioned before the D3 beta was a little too limited and you just didn't get what you needed. We know this one's focused on endgame systems. So obviously you're not in the room there, but like what could you do if you were given all that information? What could you change, do you think? Um,
I think I don't know what their ship date is, so I can't say like relative to what their ship date is. I would say if you're 3 months out, probably not much. Um, like you can change tuning variables. So like drop rates you can change. Like those kinds of things. Like if a monster's too hard or too easy, you can change that. You can change distribution. If you need programming, if you need code for something, 3 months out, probably not. 6 months out, yeah. Like we were less than 3 months when we realized we needed that ability thing on legendaries, and that was code, and it was too risky. So whereas and now we did start working on it. We just started working on it in the branch that was not going to be the shipping branch. So it wasn't like we just waited until we shipped and then no, we started. That is just we knew it wasn't going to go in the box. I would guess they're more than 6 months out, not simply because we don't have a release date yet. Like if we had one, I would imagine they'd give you a little bit of headway time. So given that, I would imagine they can change almost anything at this point. Probably the biggest things would be like anything that's art intensive would be hard to change. Like if they decided, and I don't see them deciding this, but they were like, nobody likes the barbarian. We're going to replace the barbarian with a different class. Yeah, that's not going to happen. Like, they're like, what can we change about the barbarian to make people like the barbarian? Like, it would be something like that. Because art is always takes the longest. Like, art is a long process. And so, and no matter where, if you want to add like, sometimes you can get away with things. Sometimes you can add like new areas into the game, like new dungeons or whatever, by with some tricks and some, like inventive use of existing assets and things like that. But most of the time, like it goes 3 months out tuning, 1 month out nothing. 3 months out like tuning and written word, as long as there's no voice acting, because voice acting's out. 6 months out, code, voice acting, simple art changes. A year out, you can make more major art decisions if you have to. And that's being very rough. Like, but everyone's a little different. Every shipping game's a little different. I would say a lot of like Diablo games are extremely art intensive. Because to make all that procedural content actually requires a lot. Like you need more art than the average game does, but you get more hours of play out of it, so it works for you in the long run. But it makes for and a lot of like Diablo art for I know for 3, I suspect for 4 is hand painted. Hand painted art takes forever, but it looks gorgeous. So it's I think it's worth it, but it takes a long time. So yeah, quality takes a long time.
Which makes sense. I am gonna hold you to that though. 6 months out. You heard it here. We're gonna.
I don't know nothing.
No, obviously you wouldn't, but I like to be hopeful, and I want to play.
I honestly, I hope they take as long as they need. Like I hope they don't rush. Like because I want to play Diablo 4 as much as anybody, and I want it to be great.
Makes sense. So you mentioned with the timeline of things, obviously with a beta, they are getting feedback, and maybe there's beta testers listening to this podcast who are like, I don't know what to put on that form. What would be good feedback that would be helpful for a developer? Like what is the kind of stuff that you're like, oh yeah, that is something I could change or something I would like to do?
I mean, if you're, I think that it's tough to second guess those things because you don't know what the developer is capable of, and every project is different. Some projects can pivot in some ways better than other projects can, just because of maybe the nature of how they built things or the type of game it is, like. Or the solution, because a lot of the times when people outside of game development offer feedback, they offer solutions. And then the first thing we have to do is figure out, okay, what's the problem? Like, because the solution is very rarely the problem. So that would probably be the best answer is try to think about the problem, not the solution.
That's old adage that I had heard. It's what was it? Users are great at detecting problems and terrible at providing solutions.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's not always because they don't know a good way to solve the problem, but they may not know a good way for the developer to solve the problem with the assets and tools and team that they have. So because not everything's possible. So like a good example of like good feedback for us would have been the legendaries aren't satisfying. Oh, okay. The legendaries aren't satisfying. Like, are you not getting enough of them? Are they not interesting when you're getting them? Like those are some questions I might ask, but that's a pretty good piece of feedback. Like that's letting us know like the players are not enjoying a part of the game. You guys need a crossbow that shoots bees. That is what you will often get instead of the legendaries aren't satisfying, because they're trying to solve the problem instead of actually just telling you.
So I have to ask, is that how the cluck eye came about? The bow that shoots chickens? Someone gave that feedback?
I don't know. I didn't make that. I wasn't there. I wasn't there for the bow that shoots chickens, but I fully approve of it.
I do like that, and I hope that now the Diablo 4 beta is filled with that commentary. Crossbow that shoots bees.
I mean, I want a crossbow that shoots bees, but
so as we learned in Diablo 3,
I just want a crossbow that shoots bees. There's nothing coming from behind that. There's no greater problem. It's just what I want.
I mean, Diablo 3 did teach us that bees are the most terrible, strongest thing in existence in Sanctuary.
You're welcome. That's my monster, and I designed it to kill the crap out of you.
It did its job very well. Yep, it to this day continues to do its job.
I remember when we did it, and the little projectiles come like so slow out of there. People were just like, I don't see the point of this monster. It's so easy to get out of the way for these projectiles. I'm like, I know. But wait till there's 10 of them.
Yeah.
And they're all shooting. That's like slow motion bullet hell. Good luck.
I lost a few hardcore characters along the way to that.
You're welcome.
Just a few?
Just a few. Just a few. Also,
I don't feel at all bad because I fought so hard to keep hardcore in the game, so I get to claim all those lives as my own.
And I appreciate it because it is my preferred mode. Diablo 3 related question, since we're talking about hardcore. One of the cool things that I like that was introduced for the mode was the Hall of Fallen Heroes. Where did that come from?
When did that get introduced?
Oof. That was early on.
Oh, what? Did it not ship with it? I want to say it was there in the beginning.
I didn't ship with it.
Okay.
I vaguely remember that, but I don't remember exactly how. I don't remember the story for that one.
My favorite part, I just liked having a place to put all the corpses of the characters who died along the way, instead of just having that cloaked spirit just sitting there.
I'm sure that it's someone on the team suggested it, and we thought it was a good idea, and we put it in. But yeah, I don't remember the exact details of it.
Patch 14. A quick Google told me that. Beta patch 14.
Okay.
So, back in the day.
All right. So that's before ship.
Yeah.
Okay.
Made a few dead beta characters.
I guess I killed a lot of brain cells because I don't remember that the details of that. I was a little bit busy at that time.
Yeah, as you mentioned, with the way betas work, yeah, you might have had your hands full. But a cool feature nonetheless. Other assorted Diablo 3 questions to toss his way, Nineball?
As we were going through and talking about kind of like the development process, of like the betas and stuff like that. Is there generally like a roadmap for what's going on and what you're going to have planned out? Like obviously there had to have been conversations happening about Reaper of Souls while you guys were still working on shipping the classic Diablo 3, and for the expansion after that, King of the North, that of course never saw the light of the day. Were there conversations about that even back when you were still in charge of everything? Like how far out does that outline get, and how much detail does it get filled in as time goes on?
So King of the North was not while I was there. There was not really hardly any discussion about it. Now, some of the features they might have been planning might have been features that we had talked about or wanted to do, but that was completely under Josh's reign. We once we kind of got into the first expansion, everything that I think we really wanted to do with that expansion, we had focused on. I didn't assume we were going to get more than one, so I didn't really think beyond one. But a lot of that, like with the first expansion, we knew we were going to do the Crusader years before, years. I would say 5 years before we shipped D3 maybe.
So that was even before you announced the game.
We knew already Crusader really early on, because we knew we were going to do a paladin type character, and we knew we didn't want to just redo the paladin. We felt like we could go felt like the Crusader would feel a little more Diablo, because it's a little bit of a darker character, and we knew we wanted a more melee character in armor because we didn't have that character. So it was once we kind of assigned, and we debated between Monk and Crusader, because Monk was kind of the last one I don't think Monk was the last we announced. But Demon Hunter was the last we announced.
Yeah.
But Monk was actually the last one we decided. And it was because we were debating between the Monk and the Crusader. So the Crusader was like a known quantity, because we knew whichever one didn't make it was going to be
next.
We knew Ishmael was going to be the bad guy. Is that
Malthael?
Malthael, thank you, God. Ishmael. My memory is going. We knew Malthael was going to be the bad guy, like quite a ways out. Metzen, that was kind of Metzen's idea, and so we kind of built. He was really into the mythology of the angels, and we thought that I thought that was really cool, and of course, like the angel of death, pushing with that. That's a great villain. And so we knew he was going to be the villain. We knew rifts were going to be a big part of the game, although I think we got those out before in adventure mode. But those were all things we planned well before ship. Rifts was actually a Blizzard North idea that when I came in, there was a design document written for it. Now, what we ended up doing was different in a lot of ways, but the core idea was there from the very beginning. That was always something we were going to do. And it's just one of those things where we looked at it and went, we don't need to ship with this. This is a great idea, but it's not a shipping idea. In the same way, people asked a lot about, before we shipped, are there going to be seasons? And I was kind of cagey about it, because I have a hard time, every other game I ever worked on, once you shipped it, you were done forever. You were lucky if you got patches. So in some ways, my mindset was still there. It was Diablo. I knew we'd get patches and everything. So I wasn't worried about that, but I didn't know how much content we'd be able to add and for how long. So I probably should have thought, well, of course we'll be able to, but I just like to hedge my bets. So I was always like, well, of course we're going to do seasons. We'd be stupid not to do seasons. But I can't say we're going to do it before it's on the schedule, before we actually have booked time for it and decided for a place. So what I would say is, well, I'm sure we're going to do it, but can I tell you 100% that we're going to do it? Not right now because it's not scheduled. Like, so that was kind of my answer, and people would just be like, well, they're not doing seasons. And then we released, and they're like, where are seasons? And I'm like, you're on season 1.
Yeah.
That's it. And so, it's just funny. It's just one of those things where, like, a lot of that stuff, yeah, we plan it out well ahead, but we don't necessarily know for sure until we get there what we are and aren't doing. Because when you get to the beginning of the product, when we actually got to the beginning of Reaper, that's when we started pulling everything out and going like yes, Crusader, yes, Malthea, yes, Rifts, yes, yes to different environments and things like that we knew we wanted to do. But a lot of the design then happens at that point where you actually go, yeah, but what exactly do Rifts look like? What exactly do who is Malthael? Like, what's his gig? Like, we know why he's the bad guy because we figured that out beforehand. But why is he really the bad guy? Like, let's write an actual story, like, as opposed to just the elevator pitch of why he's the bad guy. So you kind of come into it, like, I would say with a whole bunch of elevator pitches for, yeah, we want to do these things. Because it's impossible not. And I always look at games like, one of the things I like to tell game developers is try to look at your game not as a single game. Like, look at your game as patches and expansions and DLC and sequels. Like, you don't have to put everything into the first one. You're actually probably going to ruin your first game if you try to shove everything into it, because you're going to do a whole bunch of things badly or mediocre. Like, be really good at a few things. Those other ideas will have their day if your game is good. Like, so make your game good. Don't put too much into it because you've got to really focus on everything takes longer than you think it's going to take. Make those things great, and then the other things will come. And I've never met a development team that didn't end a product with like another product and a half worth of ideas on how to continue with that product.
And fewer options.
I had such a vision for Dawn of War 2 that never saw the light of day. And I had this whole thing about, Dawn of War 2, it's going to be, Dawn of War 1 is going to be nothing compared to it. And then I worked at Blizzard.
Nice. Well, Nineball, you got anything else?
I think that taps me out for my questions.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Jay, for joining us tonight. This has been awesome, and we don't want to dominate all your time tonight. So we got one.
This is really fun.
We got one more thing to do, and that close out every single show the exact same way with an ode to the cow level with a good old moo. Moo, 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 moo.
Moo, 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 moo. Moo.